In a sprawling Beverly Hills mansion perched on a hilltop overlooking the city, 17-year-old Madison Thorne trained daily in her private dojo. A trust fund baby with a sharp tongue and a black belt in Taekwondo, she was used to getting what she wanted, and she expected everyone to bow to her. Her parents were constantly traveling, leaving her to be raised by maids, tutors, and martial arts instructors. Among the house staff was a quiet black maid named Diane. She was 36, a single mother who had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but took cleaning jobs to support her son. Calm, kind, and deliberate, Diane never complained, even when Madison was cruel. But one summer afternoon, things escalated. Madison, annoyed that her new white GI wasn't folded the right way, snapped. "You can't even fold a uniform right, Diane," she sneered, arms crossed. "Maybe I should teach you how to do anything right. In fact, how about a little sparring match? You versus me. Let's see if you can actually fight back at something for once." The staff froze. Everyone knew Madison was undefeated in her age group, lightning fast, ruthless, and trained by the best. Diane didn't move. She just looked at the girl quietly. "You want to fight me?" she asked softly. "Oh, I insist," Madison said, smirking. "Unless you're scared." Something in Diane's eyes changed, not fear, but a memory. She slowly took off her apron, folded it gently, and placed it on the table. Then she walked calmly to the edge of the practice mat. "All right," she said simply. "Let's spar." Madison bounced into her stance, confident, cocky, circling Diane like a predator playing with its food. She threw the first strike, a spinning roundhouse kick aimed at Diane's ribs. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Diane dodged the kick with effortless grace. Not only did she move, she countered with a perfect sweep, dropping Madison to the mat in seconds. No aggression, no showing off, just calm, practice precision. Madison scrambled up, humiliated. "Beginner's luck," she muttered and attacked again. Punches, kicks, combos. Diane blocked them all with fluid control, then gently disarmed her with a motion so elegant it almost looked like a dance. In under 3 minutes, Madison was on the mat again, winded, frustrated, defeated. "Who are you?" she gasped. Diane looked down at her, not with anger, but with a quiet strength. "I used to teach self-defense of women in my community," she said softly. "Before I cleaned houses. Before life got complicated." Madison sat up, stunned. For the first time, the fight wasn't about ego. It wasn't even about Diane. It was about humility, and Madison had never tasted it before. That evening, something changed in the house. Madison knocked on the maid's room door, holding 2 cups of tea. "Can I sit with you?" she asked quietly. Diane nodded. From that day forward, the spoiled rich girl and the quiet maid formed an unlikely bond. Madison started helping with chores, asking questions, and listening. Diane began training her, not just in martial arts, but in self-discipline, empathy, and resilience. Months later, at a major youth martial arts competition, Madison took gold. But when the reporter asked her the secret to her success, she didn't name a coach. She pointed to Diane in the crowd and said, "She's the reason I'm standing here. She taught me what no trophy ever could." And that day, the world saw what true strength really looked like, not in fists, but in grace. The competition was over, but something deeper had begun. Madison Thorne, once the prideful daughter of billionaires, now walked with a quieter presence. Her friends noticed. Her trainers noticed. Even the mansion staff, once fearful of her mood swings, now found her polite and observant. But the biggest change was in her heart. Every afternoon, after her formal classes ended, Madison would meet Diane in the garden, away from the judgmental stares of the elite world that still saw Diane as just a help. There, between the breeze and Bougainvillea, they trained. But the lessons weren't just punches and blocks. They talked. Madison learned about Diane's childhood in Georgia, how she'd grown up poor, had to raise her younger siblings after her mother passed, and once earned a scholarship to a university for criminal justice. But life had other plans, a teenage pregnancy, a broken engagement, and the slow, crushing realization that society didn't give women like her many second chances. Yet Diane never hardened. She never let bitterness define her. Instead, She became the kind of person who builds quietly, who gives without demanding. Madison, hearing these stories, felt ashamed. Not because Diane wanted her to, but because she saw her own privilege for the first time. And one day, Madison asked a question that changed everything. "Why did you take this job? Diane, you're worth so much more." Diane smiled and sipped her tea. "I needed stability for my son, Corey. This job paid steady. It gave me the space to plan for his future. You don't always get to chase dreams right away, but that doesn't mean you stop dreaming." That night, Madison found herself staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she felt the urge to do something beyond herself. So, she did. She went to her parents, not with demands, but with intention. She told them about Diane, about her sacrifices, about Corey, about her past. At first, they were confused, then curious. Madison didn't beg them for charity. She challenged them to invest in something real. And astonishingly, they listened. Weeks later, Diane was offered a position as head coordinator of a new nonprofit being founded by the Thorn Foundation. Second Round, an initiative aimed at helping women with difficult pasts restart their careers. With a full salary, benefits, and her own office, Diane wept when Madison told her, "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Yes," Madison said, kneeling beside her. "You do. You always did. The world just took too long to notice." But this was only the beginning. At the opening of Second Round's first Women's Center, Madison stood beside Diane and her son Corey, now inspired to pursue law school. Reporters gathered, expecting a celebrity-studded speech. But Madison stepped aside and handed the microphone to Diane. "I've said enough," she told the crowd. "Now it's time you hear from the real warrior." And Diane spoke, not with loud words, but with truth. She spoke about dignity, about rising after every fall, about how strength isn't what you show in the ring, but what you carry when no one's watching. And as she spoke, a hush fell over the room. People listened, really listened. That night, Madison received a text from her old martial arts rival. So the speech, "You've changed. Respect." She smiled. Later, while cleaning out her closet, she found her first GI, the one she had once thrown at Diane in arrogance. She folded it properly this time, gently, and placed it in a frame. At the bottom of the frame, she engraved a quote, "True power is not in the belt you wear, but in the lives you lift." Months passed. The media buzz around the Second Round Foundation slowly faded, but the work was just beginning. Diane was now a woman with purpose and platform, but she remained grounded. Every morning, she arrived early to the center's modest office, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and greeted every woman who walked through the door with the same words, "You belong here." Madison, now 18, began volunteering at the center between her college applications and training sessions. She no longer fought for medals. She fought for meaning. She started organizing self-defense classes for single moms, formerly incarcerated women, and domestic abuse survivors. Diane helped to develop a trauma-informed approach. They weren't teaching these women to fight just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But with growth came resistance. Some in the elite circles of Beverly Hills whispered. They didn't like seeing Diane, a black maid turned leader, speaking at panels and sitting beside executives. Others questioned Madison's choices. "Why are you wasting your time down there? Is this a publicity stunt? You should be prepping for Yale, not hanging out with them." Madison heard it all. She ignored most of it until one night at a gala. A well-known philanthropist, Dr. Lawrence Bainbridge, cornered Madison near the champagne fountain. "I saw your little charity thing. Very noble," he said, smirking. "But let me give you some advice. Helping the helpless is a nice hobby, but it won't get you anywhere in the real world." Madison didn't flinch. She leaned forward, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Maybe that's why the real world is so broken, because people with power forget who it's really for." She walked away without waiting for a response. And the next day, she doubled down on her work at the foundation. Meanwhile, Diane was fighting a quieter, personal battle. Her son, Corey, had just begun his pre-law studies at a local university, but he was struggling, not academically, emotionally. He was one of the only black students in his program. Professors mispronounced his name. Classmates assumed he was on a diversity scholarship. When he tried to raise his hand in class, he was ignored. When he spoke up in debates, he was mocked. One night, he came home and threw his backpack across the room. "What's the point, Ma? No matter how hard I try, they'll always see me as less." Diane held him tight, her voice calm but firm. "No, they'll see what you show them. But you have to see yourself first. You are not less. You are more. And you don't have to fight alone." The next day, Madison showed up at Coy's University. Not as a celebrity, not as a savior, but as a guest speaker. She hosted a seminar on bias in education, using Coy's experience as a case study. With his permission, it made waves. The university's board launched an internal investigation. A diversity task force was formed. Professors were required to take new training. Coy, though still cautious, began to find his voice and his tribe. Back at second round, one of the center's participants, a quiet woman named Layla, shared her story during a healing circle. She had escaped a violent marriage, spent 2 years in a shelter, and was now studying nursing. When asked what changed her life, she didn't say therapy or school. She said, "Someone finally looked me in the eye and told me I was worth fighting for." That someone was Diane. Tears welled in Diane's eyes. Later that night, as the center's team locked up, Madison looked at Diane and said, "You changed me. You saved me in ways you'll never fully understand." Diane smiled, her eyes soft but fierce. "No, Madison, you saved yourself. I just reminded you who you were before the world told you who to be." They stood there for a moment, two women from opposite worlds, now walking the same path. Not master and servant, not student and teacher, but equals, warriors of the spirit, building a world where strength came from lifting, not crushing. And so, their fight continued. Not in a dojo, not with fists, but in every life they touched, every injustice they challenged, every soul they reminded of their worth. 2 years had passed since Diane and Madison first crossed fists, and hearts. What began as a fight in a mansion became a movement that reached far beyond Beverly Hills. The Second Round Foundation had now opened 4 new centers in Atlanta, Detroit, Oakland, and New Orleans, each one run by women who had once been called broken, now standing tall as leaders. National media began to take notice. Talk shows, magazines, even TED invited Diane to speak. And Madison, now 20. She had turned down Ivy League offers to attend a local university, majoring in social justice and nonprofit leadership, while continuing to train in martial arts and teach classes at the original center. But the more they grew, the more pressure they faced. Funding, politics, envy, burnout. One night, the board of trustees summoned Diane and Madison for a closed-door meeting. What happened inside shook them both. "We need to rebrand," said one of the new board members, a wealthy tech investor. "Make it sleeker, less gritty. Diane, your story is inspiring, but we think it's time for a new face, someone younger, polished, like Madison." The room fell silent. Diane looked at Madison, not with anger, but a quiet sadness. She had heard these tones before, subtle, disguised as progress, but rooted in erasure. Madison stood up slowly. "Let me be clear," she said. "Second Round exists because of Diane. You rebrand this foundation without her, and I'm out. We out." The room murmured, but Madison didn't wait. She walked out, and Diane followed. Outside, they stood under the city lights. "You didn't have to do that," Diane said. "Yes, I did," Madison replied. "Because the second I let them rewrite your story, I let them rewrite mine too." But it wasn't just the board that was crumbling. Coy, now in his 3rd year of law school, was hit with a false accusation, planted evidence in a cheating scandal. No proof, but enough doubt to put his scholarship at risk. He called Diane, shaken, his voice trembling. "They want to make an example of me, Ma. I didn't do this, but they don't care." Diane's hand shook. She had spent years teaching women to stand up, but now it was her son who was being dragged down. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to rage. The next morning, she and Madison walked into the dean's office together with a lawyer from the foundation's legal outreach team. They laid out evidence, timelines, and character references. But more than anything, they refused to be silent. "This is not about one student," Diane said calmly. "This is about how many more you've tried to bury quietly." The dean, under pressure from media and donors, backed down. Corey was cleared, reinstated, and publicly apologized to. Still, Diane didn't celebrate. That night, she sat alone in her office at the foundation, surrounded by thank you letters, awards, and newspaper clippings, but feeling more tired than triumphant. Madison found her there, staring at the framed quote on the wall. "True power is not in the belt you wear, but in the lives you lift." "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Diane whispered. "It's like no matter how much we fight, they keep finding new ways to break us." Madison knelt beside her. "Then let's break them back. With hope, with truth, with women like you leading the charge." They embraced, mother and daughter in spirit, battle sisters in reality. And then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, handwritten, from a woman in prison in another state. "I read about you in a magazine we pass around here. I'm serving 15 years, but your story made me believe I might have a second round too. If I ever get out, I want to fight beside you. Thank you for reminding me I'm still someone." Diane stared at the words, tears slipping quietly down her cheek. She folded the letter gently, looked up at Madison, and smiled. "Let's open one in a prison next." It had been nearly 5 years since that first confrontation on the polished floors of a Beverly Hills mansion. What began as a moment of pride, arrogance, and challenge between a black maid and a spoiled heiress had transformed into something no one could have predicted. Together, Diane and Madison had built a movement, not just an organization. The Second Round Foundation now operated in 12 states, with centers in community colleges, women's shelters, correctional facilities, and halfway homes. They weren't just teaching women how to fight physically. They were training them to reclaim their dignity, rebuild their lives, and rewrite their futures. And yet, this wasn't a fairy tale. The world never stopped throwing punches. When Diane launched the Second Round Reclaim Inside initiative, offering self-defense, education, and therapy programs inside women's prisons, critics erupted. "Why help criminals?" the headline shouted. "Don't waste resources on lost causes." Protesters picketed the pilot center in Louisiana. Donors pulled out. Pressure mounted. Madison stood beside Diane at a press conference, facing the cameras head-on. "If you call them lost causes," she said, "it's only because no one gave them a chance to be found. We're not saving criminals. We're investing in human potential." But it was Diane's voice that silenced the room. "I was never a criminal," she said, "but I was poor. I was black. I was invisible. If I hadn't met the right person at the right moment, I might have ended up behind those same bars." Second Round isn't about perfection. It's about redemption. The initiative stayed, and it worked. In the years that followed, more than 1,000 formerly incarcerated women graduated from Second Round programs. Some became counselors, others business owners. One even ran for city council. And Corey graduated from law school with honors. In his valedictory speech, he didn't thank politicians or professors. He thanked his mother and the girl who once challenged her to a fight. "My mom taught me to survive," he said. "Madison taught me to speak. Now, I'll spend the rest of my life defending others like them, because justice has too few warriors." Later that year, the foundation was nominated for a Human Rights Impact Award. At the Black Tie Gala in New York, Diane wore a deep blue dress Madison helped her pick out. Madison wore a modest black gown. No logos, no sparkle, just unity. When the host called their names, the crowd stood and applauded. But Diane didn't rise. She looked at Madison and whispered, "You go. This is your moment too." Madison shook her head, eyes glistening. "No, this is ours." Together, they walked onto the stage. Two women, one born with everything, one born with nothing, who had both been underestimated in different ways. In her acceptance speech, Diane said, "Strength is not about how loud you are. It's not about your belt, your bank account, or your background. Strength is waking up every day and choosing to keep going, even when the world tells you to stop. And the most powerful thing you can ever do is believe in someone before they believe in themselves. The crowd went silent, then erupted. That night, after all the lights dimmed and the cameras disappeared, Madison and Diane sat on a balcony overlooking the city. "I never told you this," Madison said, "but before I met you, I didn't know what I wanted to become. I just knew who I didn't want to be." Diane smiled softly. "And now?" "Now," Madison said, "I want to be like you." Diane looked up at the stars, her voice full of quiet pride. "No, Madison, you were never meant to be like me. You were meant to be more. And now you are." The wind was gentle. The night was calm. No crowd, no noise. Just two souls who once stood on opposite sides of the world, now forever on the same side of history. And so, the fight ended, not in victory, not in defeat, but in legacy. The Maid became a mentor. The Heiress became a warrior. And together, they gave the world its second round. The end. Dizzy,